$7.25. That's the federal minimum wage right now in 2026, and it's been frozen at that exact number since July of 2009, longest stretch with no raise in the law's whole history. But here's what trips people up. That number isn't the one that controls your paycheck, not in most of the country, because the rule almost nobody explains is this. You don't get paid the federal minimum or the state minimum or the city minimum. You get paid the highest of the three. Always the highest. And the gap there is bigger than you'd think. Same job, say you're stocking shelves, 40 hours a week. In Washington state, the floor is $17.13 an hour. Cross the line into Idaho, same shelves, same hours, and $7.25 is perfectly legal. Same work, almost $10 an hour apart, legal in both places. So when somebody slides a pay stub across the counter and says, "Wait, is this even allowed?" The honest answer is it depends entirely on a number most people have never once looked up, and a lot of them are getting shorted and have no idea. Let me show you which number actually controls yours. There's a poster for this, you've seen it. That crowded government sheet taped up by the time clock or stuck to the break room fridge, the one with the eye chart of fine print nobody reads. Somewhere on it is a minimum wage number, and most people, if they look at all, figure that's the whole story. That's the number. Done. It isn't, not even close. That one floor only matters if it's the tallest one standing. Federal law sets $7.25 as the bottom of the bottom, a hard floor under the entire country. No state, no city, no boss can legally go under it for a worker the law covers. But states are free to build higher, and most have. Cities can build higher than their own states. So the rule your paycheck actually lives by is the one nobody bothers to say out loud. Whichever number is biggest, that's the one you're owed. And this is where I'd push back on how this whole topic usually gets talked about. Every year there's a wave of headlines about the federal minimum wage. Is Congress going to raise it? Is it stuck? What's the fight? And honestly, for most working Americans, that fight barely touches their life. The federal number is almost a ghost. Real money lives at the state and city level, and that's the number people never check. Now, watch what happens at the edges, because this is where folks get genuinely confused. Some states never bothered to pass a minimum wage law at all. 5 of them: Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, Tennessee. No state number on the books. So what governs there? The federal $7.25 for anybody the federal law covers. Fine, people mostly get that one right. It's the next group that burns people. Georgia has a minimum wage on its books of $5.15. Wyoming, same, $5.15. And every so often somebody finds that number, panics, and assumes their employer can legally pay them $5.15 an hour. I've watched people argue about this online with total confidence. They're wrong. For just about every real employer in those states, that $5.15 is a dead letter. Federal law reaches over the top of it and drags the floor back up to $7.25. The state number is just sitting there, outvoted by Washington. So the trap isn't only I'm being underpaid. Sometimes the trap is believing a low number is legal when it isn't, and never saying a word because you think the law's on your boss's side. Here's the part that surprised me when I really sat with it. That federal $7.25 hasn't moved since July of 2009. And run the math on a full year of it, 40 hours a week, every week, no vacation, and you land at $15,080 before taxes for a full year of full-time work in 2026, a number written when the first iPhone was barely 2 years old. Meanwhile, across the map, Washington, D.C. sits at $17.95 an hour, Washington State $17.13, in New York City and the counties right around it $16.94, Connecticut $16.94, California $16.90 statewide. That same full-time year in Washington State around $35,600, more than double the federal floor for the exact same 40 hours. And it doesn't even stop at the state line on the way up. Cities pile on top. Seattle's floor is $21.30 an hour right now, higher than its own state, higher than any state in the country. Somebody working a register in Seattle is owed almost 3 times what the same register pays perfectly legally, a day's drive away. This is why what's the minimum wage is the wrong question. The right question is the minimum wage where exactly, and at what level, federal, state, or city, because all 3 can be true at once, and only the highest one is the one that has your back. There's a number floating around that I want to flag before it misleads you because the other legal channels love to quote it. The government tracks how many people earn at or below the federal minimum wage, and the latest count is small, about 843,000 workers, roughly 1% of everyone paid by the hour. And people hear that and think, see, minimum wage barely affects anyone anymore. But read what that number actually counts. At or below $7.25. That's it. It does not count the cashier in Arizona earning her state's $15.15. It doesn't count the server in Oregon, the home aide in Colorado, the millions of people whose floor is a state or city number well above the federal one. The 1% figure isn't measuring how many people work for minimum wage. It's measuring how many are stuck at the oldest, lowest, most frozen floor in the system. Two completely different things. And quoting the first as if it's the second is how you accidentally tell a room full of underpaid people that they don't exist.
So if you're sitting there with a pay stub trying to figure out whether the number on it is even legal, the first move isn't to memorize a federal statute, it's to figure out which of 3 floors is the tallest one over your particular job in your particular city. That alone clears up most of the confusion. But it doesn't clear up all of it. Because there's an entire class of workers the law lets an employer start at $2.13 an hour, not $7.25, $2.13. That's written into federal law on purpose, and it's completely legal right up until the exact moment it isn't. And the line between those two is where people lose the most money without ever realizing it walked out the door. $2.13 an hour. Let that sit for a second, because the first time I understood how it works, I genuinely thought I was misreading it. Federal law says an employer can pay a tipped worker, a server, a bartender, a nail tech, a delivery driver, a cash wage of $2.13 an hour. Not a typo, $2.13. And it's been legal at that exact figure for decades. But there's a string tied to it, and the whole thing lives or dies on that string. The deal is, your tips are supposed to carry you the rest of the way up to at least $7.25. The employer gets to credit your tips against what they'd otherwise owe you, up to $5.12 an hour of credit to be exact. Tips fill the gap. That's the bargain. So what happens on a dead Tuesday? The dining room's empty, the tips don't come, and your tips plus your $2.13 don't add up to $7.25? This is the part nobody tells you. The employer has to make up the difference, out of their own pocket, every single pay period. If your tips fall short of getting you to the full minimum, that shortfall is legally theirs to cover, not a favor, not a maybe, a requirement. And they can't smooth it over by saying, well, you killed it last Saturday, so it evens out. Each pay period stands on its own. Now here's where the money quietly disappears. 2 servers, same diner, same slow week, 30 hours each. Tips come in light, call it $90 for the week. Add the $2.13 base and they've each earned around $154, but 30 hours at the real minimum should be $217.50. There's a gap, $63.60 the employer owes them by law to each of them. One of them knows the makeup rule exists. She mentions it, politely, just asks how the shortfall gets handled. The check gets corrected. The other one has no idea the rule is even a thing, assumes a slow week is just a slow week, and never says a word. $63.60 gone. And it's gone again the next slow week and the one after that. And over a thin season, it stacks into real money. Money that was legally hers the entire time. Same diner, same law. The only difference between them was knowing the rule existed. Can I ask you something? When was the last time anybody actually checked their tipped paycheck against that minimum, instead of just being grateful the tips were okay? Almost nobody does, and the gap counts on that. It gets better in some places though, genuinely better, because 7 states looked at this whole $2.13 arrangement and threw it out entirely. Alaska, California, Minnesota, Montana, Nevada, Oregon, Washington. In those states, there's no tip credit at all. The employer pays you the full state minimum in cash before a single dollar of tips, and then the tips land on top, all yours. In California, that means a tipped worker starts at $16.90 an hour and keeps every tip besides. The same job that pays $2.13 plus tips in Texas. And the ground is still moving. Michigan's been in the middle of a slow-motion legal fight. Its Supreme Court ordered the tip credit phased out completely by 2030. So the 2-tier system there is on a countdown clock. What's legal this year won't be legal in a few.
Now, a quick word about something you've definitely heard, because it's gotten tangled up in all this, the no tax on tips thing. Real law, passed in 2025, and I want to be careful here because it's getting badly misunderstood. It does not raise anybody's wage, not by a penny. What it does is let qualifying tipped workers deduct some of their tip income up to $25,000 a year when they file their federal taxes, for now through 2028, and it phases out at higher incomes. That's a tax break at filing time. It is not a raise, it doesn't touch your hourly floor. And this catches people. The automatic service charge a restaurant slaps on a party of 8 isn't even a tip in the eyes of the law. Legally, that's a wage the house controls, not a gratuity you're guaranteed. Feels identical when you're the customer signing the check. Couldn't be more different on the back end. I bring that up because the gap between "I heard tips aren't taxed now" and what the law actually does is exactly the kind of gap that costs people. You can't plan around the rule you've misunderstood. And I should be straight about a limit here too, because the makeup rule isn't a magic wand. It only guarantees you reach the minimum wage, federal or your state's higher one. It doesn't promise the tips were good. It doesn't claw back a bad month. In a no-tip credit state, it's a non-issue because you're already getting the full floor in cash. The protection is real, but it's a floor, not a ceiling, and the popular version that treats it like some guaranteed payday oversells it. So picture the actual situation. You've got a pay stub in your hand. Maybe you're hourly and you're not sure your city number's being honored. Maybe you're tipped and you just learned in the last 4 minutes that slow weeks might owe you money you never collected. Either way, you've got the same problem, a number you suspect is wrong and no clear idea what a person actually does about it. Because knowing you're owed $63 and a rule exists is one thing. Getting it back out of an employer who'd rather you never noticed, a manager who shrugs, a corporate office that takes 3 weeks to answer an email, that's a whole different climb. And there's a clean, unglamorous way people actually walk it. It starts with the most boring step there is, which is also the one almost nobody does first. Figuring out the actual number. Not what you think you make, not what the poster by the fridge says, the real binding floor for your job in your city this year. The Department of Labor keeps a plain table, state by state online, and it's about as exciting as a phone book. But it's the honest answer for the state piece. The catch is, the city layer sits somewhere else entirely, usually buried on a municipal site 3 clicks deep. And it's the layer that changes mid-year when you're not looking, so people miss it. They check the state number, feel settled, and never learn their town quietly runs higher. Then comes the part that feels like nothing and decides everything. Write it down. The hours, the dates, what you are actually paid. For tipped folks especially, keep your own tally of tips because if it ever comes down to your word against the payroll system, the person with the notebook wins. And the obstacle here is just human. Nobody wants to do bookkeeping on their own paycheck after a double shift. The ones who do are the ones who months later can point at $63.60 and say, "Here, this week, you owed me this." What do most people do once they've got the math? Honestly, they start with the boss. Not dramatically. A lot of shortfalls are genuine payroll errors. A setting nobody updated when the city rate jumped in January. A short, calm message to whoever runs payroll fixes more of these than any lawsuit ever will. The friction is the shrug. The manager who says that's just how it works here. The corporate office that takes 3 weeks to answer a one-line email. And a shrug isn't a no, it's just slow. When the boss won't move, there's a free door most people don't know is there. Every state has a labor office that takes wage claims, and the federal government has the Wage and Hour Division with a hotline, 1-866-4US-WAGE. You can file a complaint without a lawyer, without a filing fee. They investigate. Now, here's a place I'll quietly disagree with how this usually gets explained. Every other video just says, call the DOL. But if your problem is a state or city rate, not the federal floor, your own state labor office is often the faster, sharper tool because it's their rule being broken, not Washington's. People default to the federal number out of habit and wait longer than they had to. There's a clock on all of this, and it's the quietest danger in the whole story. For the federal wage law, you've generally got 2 years to claim back pay, sometimes 3 if the underpayment was willful. That's it. Miss the window and the strongest case in the world is worth nothing, the same way a winning lottery ticket is worth nothing the day after it expires. The boss isn't the deadline, the calendar is. And the calendar doesn't shrug, doesn't argue, doesn't call you back, it just runs out. What's on the other side when it works? People who go through this often recover the back pay, and in a lot of cases, the law lets them collect double, the wages owed plus the same amount again as a penalty, and sometimes their legal fees on top. I'm not promising that's how yours lands. I can't see your situation, and anybody who tells you they can from across a screen is selling something. But the structure is built to make it expensive for an employer to bet you'd never notice. And one real fear deserves a straight answer. People stay quiet because they think asking gets them fired. The law flatly prohibits punishing a worker for claiming the wages they're owed, firing you, cutting your hours, freezing you out. That said, I'm not going to pretend proving retaliation is simple because it isn't. It's its own uphill fight, which is exactly the moment to stop reading the internet, stop watching guys like me, and put your actual facts in front of a real employment lawyer licensed in your state. Most of them will look at a wage case for free up front and only get paid if you do. If real money's on the table or they came after you for speaking up, that's not a video. That's a phone call to a professional who knows your county. That's the unglamorous walk. Find the real number, write everything down, ask once in writing, use the free door if asking doesn't work, and watch the clock harder than you watch the boss. So go back to that pay stub, the one on the counter or buried in an app you haven't opened in months. There's a number on it. And there's another number, the real one, the one the law already wrote down for your city and your year, sitting in a table you could pull up in about 90 seconds. Most people never put those two numbers next to each other. They just feel a vague itch that something's off, and they let it go, because checking feels like accusing, and accusing feels like trouble. But the law isn't shy about it. It picked a floor for you. It wrote it down in plain dollars. The only question it ever really asks is whether anybody bothered to look. I don't know why nobody teaches this before you need it, before the slow week, the taped up notice, the stub that doesn't sit right. They teach you the War of 1812, they never teach you the number under your own name. So look, tonight, while you're thinking about it, pull up the real one, set it next to the stub, and see if they match.